Okay, good. What I need, I guess one of the things is our agenda. One of the first things that I was hoping that we could touch base on is to establish another meeting time for a board meeting. And maybe we already have that established, because what we would use that time for is sort of the second part of this orientation. So Susan, do you happen to know when would be our next meeting in September anyhow?
They usually would not meet in September. They meet every other month. So it would have been October. The second Monday in October is the next meeting.
Okay, so one of the things that we need to do, because we have, because we just have to get caught up, and we will also have the charter board. I think the charter board will expect this of us, is that we would be oriented as well as having an opportunity to pick our officers, here in September. So we start off the school year right. So I would like to propose the normal time that we would meet would be on is it usually on the first Monday in, when would it be? First Monday in September?
Just
And
the
I'm not
second
sure,
Monday.
what is Labor Day? Labor Day is the 7th, is that right?
Correct.
I think, so would it be, just given your schedules, could you meet on Monday the 14th at 6 o'clock for another opportunity, or some other time during the either the week of the 7th or the week of the 14th, given your schedules?
I can do the 14th.
I see Yolanda's checking her book or her phone.
I could possibly do the 14th. This is Seabrooks.
Okay.
The 14th looked like it works for me.
How about you, Seema?
I have a conflict. Then, depending on the time.
No, that's okay. It's important for us to get you all there if we can. So you got another day that week that would work for you?
Well, I guess with this
Or
meeting,
the week before?
this would be 6 to 8 p.m.
Yeah,
Is that?
we could change. We could make it 5 to 7, but 6 to 8 would.
5 to 7 would be better for me because at the other
On Monday to 14th.
Mhm.
I also have a conflict on the 14th, but I am free any other day.
You also have a conflict on the 14th?
Just the 14th, but I am free every other day. That week.
You are free any other day that week, you're saying?
Yes.
How about the rest of you?
I'm flexible with the days that week.
I can do Tuesday.
You could do the next day, Tuesday?
Yes.
Who's going for Tuesday the 15th?
Would it be 5 to 7, or would it still be the same time, 6 to 8? Would that be
It wouldn't matter. I mean, on your end, would you propose 5 to 7? Would that work best for you, Seema?
Yeah, that would for me.
On the 14th, yeah.
But,
How about the rest of you? You could do it? Yeah, it looks like Angelo can, Yolanda can,
I can.
Michael can. Marie? Yeah, so let's do, if we could do 5 to 7 on Tuesday the 15th, and hopefully by that time, we could sort of combine that meeting with the remainder of this agenda. And, if we have to vote on officers or whatever, maybe we can do that as well at that meeting. So Susan, you have that date down?
Yes, I do. 15th from 5 to 7.
Okay. All
Susan,
right.
I got a real
Just
quick
one
question.
Well,
Have we ever utilized the Doodle app? Has this board ever utilized the Doodle app to help
No.
schedule meetings?
Sometimes we do. Usually the meetings are set. This has been unusual for you guys to have so many meetings, just getting you guys up to speed, but we can certainly do that.
Okay, just wondering.
DC board meeting. All right. And so I think that the first agenda item was really, what we're going to try to make happen tonight. We'll go as far as we can, but we thought it was really important for you to have an understanding of how OSSI and the DC Charter Board Authority, what they really do and what they mean, what they mean to us. There's how they're structured, so that you have that general sense. And then Ronisha Estep is also with us tonight, and when we get down there, she'll introduce herself to you. But Ronisha is plays a very important role as our business manager in the here at DC Charter School. And there are a number of things that she's responsible for. And again, it's just important for you to have this this umbrella understanding of what's involved from the compliance end, as well as the organizational end that really controls this charter school. So with that, I'm going to let Kathy share with you the concept behind the DC Charter Board Authority and OSSI. And Kathy, I'll let you know what OSSI stands for there.
Kathy, can you discuss the open meeting before we get too far in it, just so we don't miss that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Lane. I'm the Chief of Educational Services for the Children's Guild, and I have the distinct pleasure to be able to support the amazing team at the Children's Guild DC Public Charter School under the leadership of Mr. Brian Daniels. And I think that it's important, some of the topics we're going to talk tonight, because this is a complex structure in which we're operating. And for many of you being new board members, you may or may not be familiar with how DC operates its schools. But most recently, just before we get into the details of that, the DMA, the Deputy Mayor of Education, recently enacted a new open meetings law. And in that, and just at high level, because we've largely followed that, all of our board meetings are open meetings. They're publicly communicated on our website, on DC Public Charter School Board's website. Two new variables occurred that will impact how we have operated previously, that we just wanted to make sure you are aware, and we will need to establish a structure to address. The first one is not too complicated, but it involves recording and publicly posting all of our meetings. And that's a new function that we'd never been required nor had done. Now, we've kind of gotten used to that, being in a virtual environment where we frequently record board meetings and other meetings in order to capture minutes after the fact. So we have been recording our board meetings. But now we need to establish the structure that they will be publicly posted. So it's just important for board members to understand that these will be publicly posted meetings. The second component to the Open Meetings Act that impacts us, and again, it's nothing too major other than a structural adjustment we'll need to make, is that minutes now need to be approved and posted within 30 days. And historically, we had operated that minutes would be taken, and at the next board meeting, which is always generally 2 months later, as part of the board's agenda, the minutes would be reviewed and approved. So that's a structural function that we'll need to address given this new legislative action. So any questions about that?
Yes, Kathy, I'm assuming that this does not include committee meetings,
No, just public board meetings.
just public board meetings.
Correct.
So if we had an executive committee, for example, that had to discuss sensitive items,
Correct.
we would be exempt from that rule.
Correct. And you also retain the right to have a closed session that's announced, in the public session, that the board is now going into a closed session in order to address matters, legal matters or personnel matters that are not, for public consumption.
All right, great, thank you.
So it's just a new structure, and we'll have to work around also getting how we're going to get the board meeting minutes approved within 30 days, given that we only meet bi-monthly.
Is that effective immediately, or is that?
It went into effect this summer. We tried, there was a lot of advocacy against it. But let me double check, Marie, but I'm assuming it's a September 1 start date, but I'll have to check on that and we'll get back to you. I don't have, I'll pull it up during the meeting and post it.
Kathy, any efforts to have this rescinded?
Yes, there was a lot of lobbying efforts on the behalf of multiple advocacy groups for public charter schools that came out opposed to this, but were ultimately not successful.
Will there be any future attempts, do you think?
I don't know. I certainly can look into that and provide an update to you. I haven't heard much energy post the approval at the last board meeting.
Yeah.
So I'm not hopeful that they think they can overturn it or that it's important enough of an issue, because board meetings should be public.
I understand.
Do you have a recommendation as to how we might meet the 30-day requirement? Are we able to do electronic votes, or?
We can do electronic votes, and that was what we talked about today. And if that meets the board's, we would have to look in the bylaws, and I think, if we get a majority that weigh in. So if we got the minutes done promptly after each meeting, it would give board members, several weeks to weigh in, and we could track and monitor those that are outstanding. But we'll look into an electronic, if there's maybe a platform that we could use, like Microsoft Teams or something that, you knew as a board member you needed to go into and approve minutes. And we could send out reminders, and that's where they'd be posted, as opposed to emailing them out repeatedly. The board can advise us what would be an easier solution for them. But we could perhaps set up a Microsoft Teams site for the board, and then all the minutes and video recordings could be posted there for our information, and we could send out reminders to boards to go into the that platform for approval. It seems to me a more efficient way than just emailing. Are there strong opinions on that at this point?
I mean, I'm certainly supportive of doing it electronic, and and I don't remember, I mean, but if we can do it somehow through the portal, or a site, as emails, I would be supportive of that.
Same here.
Same here.
Okay, that's really helpful. I think it might be more efficient, and then we could just send reminders, hey, check and send the link, but then it becomes an active site. Okay, we will get that set up. Susan, do I have the opportunity to share my screen?
Yeah, I have that set. You can go ahead.
Can you see my screen yet?
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Sorry about that. Susan, are you sure I have the rights? Because I'm clicking share screen and
Yeah, I just looked. I was double checked. Allow participants to share screen. It's checked.
Wasn't me.
There you go.
see that?
Yes, we can.
Thanks.
There it is.
There it is.
So we just wanted to review with the board briefly kind of the public education governance structure in DC, because I know most of you, if not all, are DC residents. I lived in DC for about a decade, but I'm from New York, and my career was always in the state of Maryland in education. And I was astounded by this structure because it's quite unique and not one that I was familiar with. So we thought it would be useful to having so many board members to kind of review how this is structured. DC is one, if not the only state, if you will, and it's a district of Columbia, that the head of the public education is the mayor. And she has all authorities that are typically vested by like a state superintendent of education, which is a more common structure. And then below her in green is the deputy mayor for education. And in our case right now, Mr. Paul Kine is our deputy mayor for education. And he's done a phenomenal job leading us in a very coordinated fashion through the pandemic that closed schools in March. And as you can see, Mr. Kine is deputy mayor, is responsible for both DC public schools as well as the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, otherwise known as OSSE, O-S-S-E. And you'll hear them all most frequently referred to as OSSE. And then as an adjunct, he has the responsibility for the DC Charter School Board, the State Board of Education. And so I'm going to just unpack that a little bit for you because it is kind of a unique structure, and we're impacted by actions that are taken by both the deputy mayor, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, as well as the DC Public Charter Board. So I'm going to skip ahead a few slides. I stole this because I thought it was pretty well done. So just in the event you're not familiar with the difference between DC public schools and DC charter schools, DC public schools are what most of us are probably familiar with, the traditional public school system, where any student who lives in the district can attend the schools that are typically within their neighborhood, unless they choose to a school of choice like a magnet school or something like that. But DC also has a very robust public charter school sector. And in fact, 50% of the students in the District of Columbia are educated in a public charter school. So kids are equally divided between DC public schools and public charter schools. And it's probably most of you are familiar that charter schools are independent and have a lot more freedom to innovate. However, have a high degree of accountability, unlike a public school system. So in other words, if a public charter school is not performing or managing their resources or appropriately enrolled, the DC Charter Board has the authority to close you. Whereas in typical public school system, generally speaking, they'll just replace the school leader and maybe make some other governance structural changes. But we are our own entity and have the responsibility of what you may be familiar with as a public school system. So we are our own local education agency that is responsible for everything that it takes to run a school system. But we're doing all of that responsibility with just one school. Any questions, please feel free to stop me because where you need further information or have any questions. So we're entirely responsible for all our budget expenditures, our administration, personnel, how we deliver our instructional program. But we have a great deal of responsibility to our authorizers, DC Public Charter School Board, for accountability to our charter. So again, just to give you a different context for this, the mayor, again, oversees the deputy mayor of education, and the deputy mayor of education reports to the DC City Council. And OSSI, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, also reports to the City Council. And local LEA, which is both DC Public Charter Schools and the Children's Guild DC Public Charter School, have responsibility to the City Council in that any laws, policy changes, regulations that they pass apply to us. And that's where this open meetings law came from, was the DC City Council. So it applied to us as well. And then we're all responsible for implementing our schools. So moving on from there, what that all means is that, you know, DC essentially has 60 plus different school districts, because each school district or LEA has their own policies and their own procedures. So DC Public Charter School has their own kind of structural framework, a state, you know, their superintendent, their assistant superintendents, instructional support folks, technology folks, professional development folks, curriculum folks, athletics, human resources, legal, all of those pieces. And public charter schools are an LEA, and we have to provide all of those supports and services to our Children's Guild DC Public Charter School, as well as being mindful to what DC Charter Board and OSSI provide us guidance to implement as well. So I just say that to highlight, we have a lot of masters in DC who pass a lot of policies and regulations and guidance and expect us to follow it. And, you know, I can attest to, it's a challenge to keep up with all these masters, if you will. And Renisha Estep, who does a phenomenal job managing our compliance with expectations with all of these authorizers, as well as Tana Jackson, who magnificently navigates the world of OSSI and special education. But I can assure you, and they'll be very modest, it is an enormous amount of requirements that we're constantly being asked to respond to. Moving on, just to be a little bit more specific, is our primary responsibility of sorts is to the DC Public Charter School Board. And this slide is a little dated and showing the executive director, Scott Pearson. As many of you may know, Scott was to retire at the end of last school year and then graciously agreed to kind of stay on because of COVID and now.
It's me, Miss Russell. I have missed you guys so much. I am so happy.
And I would like to just notify the board that Dr. Michelle Walker Davis is our new executive director for DC Charter Board. I had the opportunity to attend a meet and greet with her, and she seems absolutely lovely, abundantly qualified for the role, and laid out a very clear, thoughtful plan for how she intends to take the lead, and particularly within the environment where all schools now are virtual, essentially, at this time. So we look forward to collaborating with and partnering with Dr. Walker Davis. And she will be eager to meet you and to get to know your roles and responsibilities. But it's important that this board understands that she is our authorizer and has the authority to recommend to her board, the actual charter school board, our closure, if you will. So it's very important in our interactions with Dr. Walker Davis that, we're informed. She'll ask very astute questions and want to understand your role as board members in the school, and that you're fully aware and informed of both our strengths, our areas for growth, and any challenges that we may have, navigating this environment. Any questions about the DC Charter School Board?
This is Marie. I did have a quick question.
Yes.
I know at some point over the summer, I saw at least one, maybe two sort of emails go out to the board about participating in, and I was confused about what board it was referring to, but I think it was referring to the DC Public Charter School Board. Can you talk a little bit about that accessibility and what?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Marie. That's a really important point. So what Marie references is if we have any changes or modifications or requirements for approval, we bring them to Dr. Walker Davis's board. So if you will, like Andy is the CEO of the Children's Guild, but he has you guys as a board that he answers to and that you hold him accountable. And that's the same thing with Dr. Walker Davis. She has a volunteer board whose responsibility is to approve new schools, provide oversight of the schools in operation, and then has the power to revoke a school's charter. We are very fortunate and grateful that in December of 2019, we were up for a 5-year review. And at that time, the board had the authority to revoke our charter and close our school. Thankfully, they were pleased with the progress that we had made, and it's a rigorous review process that went on for over 1.5 years. And they ultimately approved our charter for 5 more years. So we're in a good place where right now that's not, hanging over our head. That said, the DC Charter Board always has the authority to revoke your charter. Generally speaking, outside of a review process, it's only going to happen if there's fiscal mismanagement. And they're certainly going to make us aware of that in advance of any decision. Like, we would be well aware that they're concerned about finances, and in our case, they are not. That's never been an issue for us, but they do provide that oversight. Additionally, why we had to go before the charter board this summer was we were doing some renovations to our gym space, and they are required to approve renovations or adjustments to your charter. So we were, in essence, adding on to our facility, which they have to approve. So it required us to go before the board for their approval to renovate the gym. And so from time to time, there may be other cases where we have to go before them. If you wanted to change, say we wanted to add pre-K, well, that's not in our charter right now. We would have to go before the board to get their approval to add pre-K. If we wanted to expand our enrollment beyond our currently approved 450 students, say we wanted to have 500 or 600 students in our school, that too would require the DC Charter Board's approval, and we would have to go through that process. And generally speaking, it's well advised that there's the board president participates in that meeting with the school leadership, and but at the very least, a board member should be available and informed enough to participate and respond to any questions that the board may have. That answer your question, Marie?
It does, and just one follow-up. So it sounds like you're saying that there is the ability to attend those meetings, are probably public meetings, the same as ours, right?
Correct.
And while that's great if we can, you'll let us know when you really need us to, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's
And
all
we-
I wanted to know.
Any other questions about because our relationship with the DC Public Charter School Board and the former executive director had always been very positive and collegial and great communication, and we intend to establish that same relationship with Dr. Walker Davis. But they like to see engaged boards, so that's just something for your information. Any other questions about DC Charter Board? Okay, seeing none, I will move on down to the role of OSSI, the Office of the State Superintendent, currently led by State Superintendent Hansel Kang. So this is our state education agency, and they are primarily responsible for statewide policies and regulations. They will provide us some resources and support, and they hold the DC Public Charter Schools accountable, like the DC Charter Board holds us accountable, but they also hold us accountable for all the policies and regulations. And Dr. Jackson will speak later in the evening specific to special education, which primarily entirely falls under the responsibility and supervision of OSSI. And that's, another complicated series of expectations, guidance, regulations, the provision of transportation and the like. But Dr. Jackson is going to unpack that a little bit further as it relates to the day-to-day experience at the school. That's just kind of a high-level overview of OSSI. Any questions about OSSI? This kind of gives you a little bit more information about their relationship to the public schools. So they have some oversight over our funding for programs and facility financing and the like, as well as special education service delivery. Where we have a lot of reporting requirements to OSSI, and so they maintain all that data and hold us accountable to that. Any questions about OSSI at the high level? Okay, and then just in closing, just another kind of graphic of how this complex reporting structure works. So you have a state board of education that oversees Hansel Kang as the state superintendent of education, Hansel is the office of the state superintendent, and she's responsible for both DC public charter schools as well as DC public schools, and both of the public charter school board as well. So we just wanted to kind of orient you because it does, you know, it is a very unique structure and it creates a lot of masters for us. But it's important, I think, that you all have an awareness of, as you hear these names and acronyms being thrown out, what their relationship is to us. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, if there's anything additional there. Okay, then I think we'll pass it on to, I don't know, Renisha or Tana, who wants to take the reins next?
Tana, I believe she has another engagement, so I wanted to let her go ahead and go first.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you and good evening, everyone. I am Tana Jackson and I currently serve as the Special Education Supervisor at the Children's Guild DC campus. Hello. As Kathy was indicating, I just wanted to kind of walk the board through what it looks like in a day of life at the Children's Guild DC Public Charter School as it relates to special education services. I'm really thankful for the team that we have as we continue to seek to provide our parents with the best quality education possible. And with that, the Children's DC Public Charter School, pardon me, I just got new retainers, so I'm trying to work this new machinery in my mouth. So I apologize, my words sound distorted. We have the privilege of serving the full continuum in special education services. And what that typically looks like is we're able to offer our special ed students from level 1 through 4. And I'll talk to you guys a little bit about what that means as it relates to services. In addition to that, our students are also provided with related services according to their IEP needs. So we offer students occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language services, and behavior support services as well. As it relates to the level or what I spoke about earlier, understanding the full continuum. So our students, the goal of course is always to have our students in the least restricted environment, educated with their non-disabled peers for as much as it is allowed based upon their need. So our students that serve level 1, according to OSCE, they rank students according to the hours that they receive within their IEP services. So our level 1 students are anywhere between 0 and 7.5. So those students will either receive services as what we consider the push-in services, where our special education resource teachers will push into those classrooms to provide those services. And we also have pull-out services for our students who require additional services outside of the general education classroom, away from their disabled peers, to identify and to begin to work on their specified special education goals. And then our level 2 students receive anywhere between 8 to 16 hours, still in the same classroom setting with their disabled peers. They will either receive services inside of the general education classroom, or they will be pulled out according to their IEP. The next is our level 3 students, who will basically be receiving anywhere between 17 and 24 hours of service. Again, the same setup, or our students will be pulled out for services to work on the areas of deficit, or receive services inside of the classroom with their non-disabled peers with actually a resource teacher. And then we have our level 4, which is considered self-contained. And that's for any student who receives 25.5 or more hours. Typically, these students fall between 3 to 4 grade levels below and need additional assistance in order to access the curriculum. And so these students currently, right now, we have about 12 self-contained classrooms where we have dedicated aides, as well as what we consider therapeutic behavior aides, as well as teachers' assistants. Our students are given the opportunity for full exposure. So although in self-contained classrooms, our teachers work really hard to expose our children to the curriculum so that they can receive those services. For our students who typically have gone through the continuum and we have identified that they require additional support, we do a full meet with the team to identify the additional needs of the students. And at that point, would recommend them for our non-public placement. And typically those students do not go through that process until they have reached the full continuum, and at which point we believe that they need some additional supports that we are unable to offer them. At that time, the team would get together, we would speak about the data, bring the parents in, all related service providers, and make the determination, at which point we do something called a JRS, which is a justification for removal that we submit to OSSI. They, at which time, look at all of our data. We come together as a team, and if OSSI is approved what we have submitted, then we send our children there. We still serve as their LEA, so we still are in every meeting with them. They just are served at a non-public school. Currently, we have 11 students in that placement. And so our goal and our focus at the Children's Guild DC is that we really have our students integrated where they're fully learning, that our teachers are following curriculum that provides the best needs for our students. We do frequent check-ins. So despite, we encourage our parents, even though, you may be at your year mark, you don't have to wait until that time. Since COVID-19, what we have implemented, and we sent it over to OSSI, our guidance within our special education department, typically every new student to the Children's Guild will receive a 30-day review, just so that our team can get to know them better, to review their IEP, to see if there are any changes. However, we add an additional layer to that that was not asked of us for OSSI, but we did submit it because we thought that it would be really critical as we talked about any regressions that students may have had due to COVID-19. So this year, we have implemented that all students, regardless if they are new to the Children's Guild or not, will receive a 45-day review. That will put us ahead of everything to really help to understand what the needs of our students are, to ensure that anything that they've missed, we've created a plan to help bridge the academic gap for as much as we can as it relates to the national pandemic. And so we've already begun that work. Our parents are fully aware, so we will create educational plans that will help meet the deficits of our students. And so every student will be reviewed over these next 45 days to determine what their needs are. And that's something that I am really grateful to see, that we are implementing such a kind of head of the game to ensure that our students are given the very best educational opportunity they can at the Children's Guild. I know I said a lot about special education services, so I'll pause there to ask if there are any questions that I may answer for you as it relates to what I just covered.
Hi, this is Marie. Quick question. So I know one of the, and you may not know the answer, maybe Kathy, this is more a question for you, but I know one of the things that we would have as a primary task of the board would be overseeing the success of the school and academic success of the school. So a lot of what you're talking about, of what you're doing in this area with special education, I'm wondering how, from a communication perspective, how we receive information to understand our compliance and our success or challenges in the area.
Thank you, Marie. Renisha is going to go over in a little bit how the OSSI and the DC Public Charter Board hold us accountable for the myriad requirements. And then we report to the board at each board meeting on a couple of things. One is in the principal's report, there's always information that's relevant to what's going on each quarter that would be important for the board to know. For example, we may have assessment data, beginning of the year assessment data that at our September meeting that we could share the results of that. We can share data relevant to enrollment of the students have disabilities. We're typically at about 50%. We're chartered to up to 60% students with disabilities. It'll come out in our budget. You'll be made aware in our budget in terms of our staffing, and you'll see the volume of special education staffing as well as the related service providers who support the students' needs. When I say a related service provider, what I mean are speech language pathologist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, therapeutic behavior aides, and the like. So all of those positions show in the budget, and that's another way of keeping you informed of how we're supporting the students. At different points in the year, we'll have outcome data, academic outcome data, attendance data, discipline data, and we historically break that down by our students with disabilities and our students in the general education population, so that we can assure that our students with disabilities are not being disproportionately impacted by any disciplinary or academic outcomes that we report. We don't want only our gen eds to be demonstrating growth. We're equally as responsible for our students with disabilities. So in each of our bi-monthly board reports, when the data is relevant, it's shared with the board for their information and input. Does that answer your question?
So I got another question. This is Brian. I think you probably kind of answered when you started talking about the different types of staff that we have. I was kind of wondering whether the special education students are kind of classified into different groups, and do we have like a ratio of occupational therapists, to those particular students, and so on and so forth, what those ratios may be.
Yeah, that's a really astute question. And we have an established protocol with our compliance and continuous quality assurance office at the Children's Guild, where on a weekly basis, Dr. Jackson forwards what's called the service page of the IEP, because the IEP has a number of components, but one is the service page. So how much special ed services are being delivered to the children, and is that being done in the gen ed environment, or is it done in a special ed environment? And that's broken down by hours. And then if a related service is required, say a social work service, it may be for 1 hour a week. And if occupational therapy is required, maybe 1 hour a month. I'm making these numbers up because each student is individualized. So Dr. Jackson submits the IEP service page to our compliance office on a weekly basis, who maintain a spreadsheet for how many hours in total do students require speech language pathology or social work services. And then we have ratios by way of non-public guidance, special education guidance, of how many providers are necessary to deliver the amount of hours of services required on a monthly basis. So for example, if we have students who require 20 hours a week of speech language pathologist, then we essentially need a full-time speech language pathologist to provide those services, because you have to allow for planning time, meeting time, assessment time, IEP reading time, and the like. So we have a formula that guides our staffing ratios on how many of each of the related service providers and special ed teachers are required based on student IEPs.
Thank you. Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? Okay. Dr. Jackson?
Sorry about that. I hit the mute button. And so yes, to just indicate that once we do return, another portion of that, once we return back to brick and mortar, we are responsible for providing transportation for students with disabilities that we do submit to OSSI as it relates to being able to transport them to and from school. So when we return, that will be a task that we will be faced with to ensure that we do provide those transportation opportunities for our students that will require that. In addition to that, I know that also the question was asked about disabilities and students being categorized. We do look at all of that information and that data based on assessments that were given, and then based on the students' needs and what they require, it's how we place them. So students are identified with those services based on assessments that the team reviews and gives us an opportunity to do so.
Also the, when you say push in, can you give an example of what a push in service is versus a pull out, why you do push in and why you do pull out?
Sure. So thank you for that, Dr. Ross. So push-in services are essentially where a special education teacher, what we consider a resource teacher, would go in and support students with the identified area in their IEP. So currently, right now, students receive services for special education, direct services in the area of ELA as well as math. So a special education teacher would go in to provide this service. This gives the child with a disability an opportunity to have additional resources and support as they are educated in a whole group setting with their non-disabled peers. For our students who would require some additional resources, and typically when students are identified as students who will be receiving pull-out services, is that we've identified that there are some basic skills that are lacking for their basic knowledge that would require them to get reinforcement that could not be done inside of the general education classroom setting. So we would typically pull those students to work on those basic skills to help strengthen them so that when they return back into the classroom, they have a full integration. So our students who, as I indicated, between our levels 1 and 3, receive those services, both push-in, where the special education resource teacher is actually going into their math and their ELA classes. And then for those same students who would require additional support to work on the basic skills that we see that there's an academic, and we would pull those students out to then work on those skills to reinforce that so that when they get back into the general education setting with their non-disabled peers, they're able to work on those gaps and those deficits.
So Tana, does that mean that essentially, let's just say I'm having trouble with math, the teacher comes in, the resource teacher, and sort of whispers in my ear and says, whoops, you should have gone back and divided before you did this or that. So, I mean, is that the kind of thing? It's more or less just rightly going over there and talking while the teacher's talking.
Yeah, so essentially the way that we have it modeled, which I really think is really beneficial for our students, is that a lot of times our students really can't tell the difference between the general education teacher and the special education teacher because they work so cohesively together. So we try not to have our students while in class working with their special educator, especially as they get older, to have them kind of work or do that. But the special education teacher is integrated into the classroom, fully working with the students to ensure that they get there. So typically in whole group, they're walking around to ensure that students are getting it, that they have any additional questions or needs, that they're able to provide them to them, and to ensure that they're kind of on track and they have things going. Our teachers do that whole group instruction, and then what we do is we also break into small groups. So there's when children have those opportunities to work in a small group setting, we have those centers going, but our teachers do a really great job with integrating the dance, if you will, so that there's no distinctive difference so the children don't feel like there's something additional. So our teachers really do a really great job with that, but our teachers are definitely there in the classroom to reinforce anything that our students are having difficulties with while they're doing whole group, as well as the small group settings that happen in all of the classes. And just for clarification, our level 4 is taught by a special educator. So the students are with all disabled peers with like disabilities. And so that special education teacher at a level 4 provides all of the services. So special education for their math, their reading, their science, social studies, and then they're still pulled out for any related services that are required per their IEP.
And just from a numbers perspective, everyone, we have 12 special education teachers that are working in those self-contained environment. We have 4 resource teachers that handle all of the push-in and pull-out hours. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how large our special education staff is, and that doesn't even include the teacher assistants and the therapeutic behavior aides that will also be in the classroom to provide supports.
Are there any other questions for me that I can answer before I have to leave?
It's time for you to go be a mom.
It is. My youngest daughter starts middle school tomorrow, so they're having a mandatory parent meeting that I'm about 20 minutes late for. So thank you all very much. It was great meeting you. I look forward to a productive school year.
Congratulations on day ones. Tana's had a big day, so we got a starting middle school, one starting high school, and one had her first day of college today. So big day of first.
Yes, it's been an experience. You all have a great evening. Thank you so much again. It was nice meeting all of you all. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Brady, you're welcome. Good night.
All right, with no further ado, we're gonna get jumped into some fun compliance reporting stuff. Okay, so just as Kathy mentioned, we have 2 reporting agencies that we are obligated to report almost nearly 100 compliance reports to, and that is your OSSI and your Public Charter School Board, so PCSB. There are several reporting categories that intertwine between the 2 entities, and those include attendance, discipline, enrollment, financial reporting, any school-wide policies and procedures that we implement for our building, special education, staff background checks, as well as federal grants. Anybody have any questions about those buckets so far? All right, let's rock and roll. Okay, so we do have a few major categories that we do use for the websites that they require us to submit to. And a huge one is called SLED, and that is very big words, statewide longitudinal education data. It's a whole lot to remember, but we affectionately call it SLED. And that is where it houses all of our enrollment data for our non-public students, as well as the students that are in our facility, as well as some demographic information. And I'll run through a few of these systems after I finish this little part. We also have Click that we get through. It's a quick-based app that we get through OSSI, and it basically allows us to see visual and statistical data that we submit to them. So it gives us the algorithms already calculate percentages for attendance, for in-seat attendance, and it also houses all of the state assessment results. So when we take the park, when we have access and all of those things, we can see those test scores in that data system. And for PCSB, all of their requirements typically go through a system called Epicenter. It's just a website where they give us a reporting calendar, and they'll give us notifications sometimes a month ahead of time or a few months ahead of time for all of the compliance regulations that we have for them, as well as the DC Public Charter School Board Hub. And the Hub is a place that has all of our financial reports, our performance goals reviews, our AAF, which is our Alternative Accountability Framework, and all of the governing board data. So that is where all of you guys' lovely information is going to go. So the board knows who our governing board is, as well as they are able to contact you without us. So just so they'll have all that contact information, just to give you guys, let you know, if you get anything from Public Charter Board and you wonder, hey, how did they know who I was? That's how you know. Did anybody have any questions so far? All right, I'm going to share my screen to walk through some of these databases. All right, can everybody see?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is our SLED database. And when we log in here, we always have to do this attestation statement just to agree that the information that we see in here is protected. So in here, you will see where our enrollment LEA summary, and it also identifies our students broken down by school. So you can see, which kids we have, and these are all the names of our non-pub schools. So if you wanted to know exactly which schools that we have our level 5 students at, we have them at our Chillum location in PG. We have one new student at Ivy Mount School in Rockville. We have a school at Catherine Thomas, Lieutenant Joseph P. Kennedy, of course, our school, but we also have non-pub kids at Foundation. It also breaks down things like, you know, gender, race, and ethnicity. So if we needed to get any demographic information for all of our students, we could find that here, as well as the wards. So it gives us all the information so we can pretty much see, and this kind of ties into how we track our enrollment trends as well, so we can see where the majority of our students are coming from. And as you can see, we're all through 5, 6, 7, and 8. Any questions so far about this? All right, we're going to venture off into another one. Make the control go away. All right, so here we have Epicenter. Oh goodness, now it's not working. Oh, maybe it's because I'm sharing my screen that it won't let me. Let's see. Okay, so here we go. So here we have Epicenter. This is all of where all the PCSB compliance requirements go. And on the left-hand screen, it'll show all of our current tasks. So everything that we have pending that we have not submitted yet will show up in this screen. And anyone who has access to our Epicenter dashboard will get the notifications about all of the requirements that are due. So a big one that you guys were asking about, how would you know about if we are reaching our goals and all of these things? Every year we are required to submit an annual report to PCSB. So that includes pretty much all of our targets that we met or did not meet in the prior school year. So this year we're going to be reporting out on data that we have from last school year. And the next fun one is my favorite one, is Click. So Click is really interactive. This lets us see everything. If you're a visual person and you like your graphs and all of these things, this allows us to have the information that we need and can be able to, you know, transcribe it into any various reports that we have to submit or things of that nature. So just to go and click in one, just so you're able to see. So this was our NC attendance for last school year. We do have 2, and the reason that there's a difference, one is just for students that are enrolled at the DC campus, and the other one includes all of our students. So that would include the attendance for our non-pub students. So it also has things, as you can see, it has our PARCC and MSAA results, our health and education, our health and phys ed data. We don't have any 9th grade outcomes, obviously. It also houses where we submit all of our meal forms. So everything that our food services agency manager takes care of reports here as well. So all federal requirements. Did anybody have any questions about the databases or any of our compliance requirements?
Yep. Are the tools that you just walked us through provided to the Children's Guild, or are these things that have been developed by you guys?
So they have been provided to the Children's Guild. The only difference with this, the Click app, the last one that I showed you, they allow us to take the data that they give us and to create our own reports and our own, we call them applications. So if we wanted to create, let's just say, somebody wanted to know what are the demographics of all of our ethnicities of our students, we will be able to go in and, you know, be able to customize the books that we want.
And from a management standpoint, how frequently do you meet with the leadership team of each school, and how frequently do you look at all the schools in total as a management team in the Guild itself?
Kathy, did you want to take that? I can answer specifically for DC.
You're on mute, Ken.
You're on mute, Kat.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nish.
So they just wanted some information around, as the educational agency that controls all these things, how often you all meet with, different program leaders around all of the compliance requirements.
How often as a leadership team in the guild itself do you look at all of them together and compare?
All of the requirements.
Well, I mean, the things that came up were absentee, attendance, various other metrics that you might use to keep track of how the school is doing on some type of regular basis. And so my question was really about how often do you meet with in this case, the DC Charter Schools leadership team to go over those various metrics that you find that you believe are the most important, number one. And then secondly, how often do you meet as a leadership team within the guild itself to look at your portfolio of schools?
So Brian meets with his leadership team on generally, if not a daily basis, a bi-weekly basis. We're just getting started in this year, and then I typically join that leadership team on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis. And depending on the year, what data is available, attendance is regularly available. We might look at it on a monthly basis, even though there's an attendance committee that Renisha chairs, and they're looking at it on a regular basis. We also, as a Children's Guild, as the operator, have a monthly meeting with Brian and his leadership team that we call our IMAT, our Inter-Organizational Management and Accountability Team. And at that meeting on a monthly basis, there's folks from HR and compliance and finance from the Children's Guild, and then Brian's leadership team. And I run that meeting, and we take all of the data points that are relevant to our charter goals, which include attendance, discipline, academic performance, and we monitor that data at that monthly meeting. As for the DC Executive Director of DC Charter Board, they have all these reporting requirements and documentation that Renisha is sharing with you that are reported to them on a regular basis. And if they see something that's of concern to them, they will reach out to us and seek additional information to help them better understand if we have disproportionate discipline data as it relates to our students with disabilities, for example, or our attendance rates and truancy rates exceed our targets. Reach out to us right away based on those monthly data submissions to inquire and find out what we're doing about it. With the DC Charter Board, you would only be held accountable to those metrics at your 5-year review. And if you were seeking approval for something such as I mentioned before, an expansion of grade band, or if you wanted to expand your facility in some ways, then they would be analyzing data relative to those particular requests in a DC board meeting.
Thank you for that. My second question really went not to the DC Charter Board per se, but more as to the Children's Guild, and how you look at the portfolio of schools that you manage and uncover best practices, ideas that worked in one school, maybe can be used to help at another school. So how often do you guys look at the portfolio?
So I do on a daily basis as the Chief of Educational Services. That's my responsibility. I'm essentially superintendent of all our network of schools, Children's Guild. But specifically, we do a number of things. We meet as a group of principals on a monthly basis. And in the past year and a half, since I've been here, we've been using a process called instructional rounds. And if you think about doctor's rounds, and we go around to each of the different schools and the school leader identifies a problem of practice, something that they've been focused on and they're trying to improve upon. And then the group of principals go around and do a full day of observations, looking specifically for examples or demonstration of where they saw it or where it might have been a missed opportunity, and provide that feedback to the host school principal. On the next level, we included this year our instructional coaches in that process. So once a month, I'd go around with all the principals to each of the 6 schools in our network. And then on another week, we would go around with instructional coaches, trying to build their leadership capacity and also helping them to better understand the deployment of our Trans-Ed 8 organizational philosophy. So specifically looking for elements of the Trans-Ed 8 that each school is working on, and providing feedback to that instructional leader as to how they might support their teachers in further implementing the Trans-Ed 8. Additionally, since the COVID closure, we've used a project management approach that's included representatives from throughout the organization of the Children's Guild, each of the school leaders, and then representatives of the each school to participate in how we lifted distance learning in the spring. And then we pivoted once we got that up and running to develop how we would implement hybrid learning environment. And then when the schools, districts across the larger DC, Baltimore geography decided that they were going to go distance learning again, we pivoted back to that. And so we've been meeting on a weekly basis with all of these school leaders, both in instructional leadership, instructional technology, special education, the related service providers, school counselors who are responsible for the social emotional wellness of our children. What else? Operations, the business, the facilities folks. And so we meet on a weekly basis and report out on the recommendations for how we would implement these different strategies in each of our discrete schools. And there's been an enormous amount of information sharing, best practices uncovered, collegial relationships formed, and just frankly, leadership growth by hearing what's happening in the other schools, since each of our schools are very different. But have plenty of talent in each of them. So there's been a tremendous amount of learning that's occurred through that project management structure.
Great, thank you so much. Sounds like you guys have a lot of good structure around the managing of the portfolio as well as individual schools, and sounds like there are plenty of early warning signals that can come up if there's ever any issue that happens. Thank you for that.
Appreciate your question and the positive feedback, Michael. It's been a very it's been a heavy lift these last 6 months, and the team has really risen above and beyond and really excelled in this work collaboratively. So I'm really enormously proud of the work and appreciate you recognizing that.
And I should mention one other thing for the board. We're very lucky to have Kathy, because, one of the things that helps us immensely is that in her previous job, Kathy was essentially the DC Charter Board for not only for the Children's Guild, but other schools in the Anne Arundel County. So from an authorizer's perspective, she not only understands the educational piece, but she truly understands the importance of all of these other systems and how a school system has to monitor. I think that's one of the reasons why we have a strong sort of support base around all the schools. And, I think without that experience, it'd be hard to do this if you sort of didn't come from it'd take you a while to catch on what's important if you really didn't come from that kind of structure. So that's why I say we're really lucky to have Kathy, given her experience in that area.
What comes through, it's one of the things that comes through for me is just the complexity of running a school in today's world. And while seems to be a lot of structure around compliance and various masters that have to serve, it seems almost necessary because of the complexity of just running a school that deals with, challenged students. I'm developing a real, strong appreciation for the work that you guys do.
Thank you. School leaders do heavy lifts, so my hats are off to them on a daily basis.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
We're a good team.
So I would say that sort of gives you the overall structure. And what we're going to go to next is really the the contract that the DC Charter Board has with the Children's Guild, so you really understand what you're paying for and what you get for your money. So keep in mind, the very first thing is you're paying a 12% of your budget to have the oversight of the charter of the DC of the Children's Guild support. And so really what happens is in DC, the cost that would be acceptable to DC without, really taking a strong look at it would be anything 18% or less. So we charge 12% of your budget, which would be 12% of $13 million. So that's what you're essentially paying for the Children's Guild support. And as we go through these slides, this will give you an idea of what you get for your money, and on the other end, what you don't get for your money. And Susan, if you would just start taking us through the slides, so you could see that the specific obligations of the Children's Guild is that we provide essentially the staff to the Children's Guild DC Charter School. We also are going to provide the following kind of services that go with that. So on the left side of your screen, you see we're doing the management of the day-to-day operations of the school, including assessment of the principal. We're also providing deployment of transformation education and the assessment of the fidelity to it, which is known as the Trans-Ed 8. And if we have enough time, you'll hear about that tonight. If not, you'll hear about that on the 14th. We're providing all the accounting, budgeting, preparation, bookkeeping, and the quarterly financial reports for the organization. And any external expenses, though, like say the DC Charter Board, in addition to that 12%, you're paying for the auditing of the fiscal management of the DC Charter Board. And the management of accounts receivable, including collections, is something else that we're doing. And of course, we do the accounts payable. We're paying your bills. We do all the human resource work, the hiring, benefit management, employee relations. And then when it comes to facility management and operation, the only thing that you pay for in that is that we oversee it all, but you pay for your own operations person, or the person has a little more sort of ability and experience than a general custodian. Takes care of all the custodial services, but also is someone who generally has a good understanding of how to operate the systems in the school. Your oversight of the public relations and marketing, that's one thing we're doing, and the messaging. But the DC campus is paying for its own website. Anytime they get updated, if you want to have a sign in a bus that says send your kid to the DC charter school, DC charter school is paying for that, and any actual marketing costs for student recruitment and promotion of the school. So again, our marketing and communications department is just overseeing what you're doing. We're facilitating what you're doing, but the expenses, direct expenses related to that is being paid by the DC Charter Board. The management of the computer and information technology support, okay, we're gonna be doing all of that, but you pay for your own IT support staff person that supports your school in case the computers don't work or your people don't understand how to use the software, that kind of thing. And again, the Children's Guild, in that 12%, we're dealing with purchasing and business operations, but the salary of Ronisha is the responsibility of the DC campus. Even though she works for us, you sort of pay for her in the same way you pay for Brian Daniels or a teacher. When we get to the management and planning of the staff, when it comes to training, what we call the Children's Guild Institute, or Transformation Education Institute, oversees training and the planning of the staff training, and provides consultation in that area. What you're paying for directly is if you, I forget where you went. I know you didn't go, there was a name, I'm thinking of when you went to Disney, but I don't believe that the DC.
Leverage leadership, Andy, they did the leverage leadership.
Oh, leverage leadership. So that program was an expensive program. I don't know, what would you say that cost, Kathy?
$80,000 for 1 year.
Okay, so when
for 4 people.
Staff went there, then you paid that $80,000. The Children's Guild does not provide that for any of the charter schools. That's in your own charter school budget.
We also send student staff to KIPP to get their special ed certification.
That would be additional. Same thing with GW, is that right?
Yeah, we pay part of that. Just as part of our policy warrants that we pay part of that.
And so your management of any special education services, again, we are providing the oversight of TANA when it comes to special education. And, but really TANA and all the special education teachers are actually carrying out the services. Then we provide admission support for student recruitment. So when, again, Brandon Turner, who I believe you've met, Brandon is really out there recruiting, and we pay for that that salary. But if again, if there's marketing, ad in a newspaper, bus signs, whatever, again, that's the responsibility of the school. And the school also has the responsibility for retaining the students that it has. So, so really, when they lose students, it just makes it harder to recruit in that respect. Then consulting and technical support, which is really for customer relationships and fundraising. We're going to pay for that. You have access to our fundraising department. However, if you were going to have, say, a capital campaign to pay for a playground, then, and you needed someone to actually, a full-time person, say it's a $300,000, $400,000 capital campaign, Gary Kellner would oversee, he would also consult with that person, but Brian would probably be way too busy to be able to manage that capital campaign. So if you had to hire a staff person, you would have to pay for that person to assist you in raising the money. Where we're going to help you out is if we'll put you into our, I forget what, we're just starting something. It's like a holiday catalog. So if we say you need computers for kids, we'll put you in that catalog. We'll go out and talk to everybody we know to try to raise money for that, to get them to buy something out of the catalog to support the school. But when it comes for printing and advertisements, that's really the responsibility of the DC Charter School. So in general, that's how this is all broken down. And of course, Kathy, we pay for Kathy, and Kathy is the one that supervises Brian, and the Children's Guild manages the supervision and assessment of the principal. That's why when we say the DC Charter Board's only responsibility for management is really the Educational Management Organization. So your responsibility for management is covered by you hire us to do that for you. And on the other end, if you feel like the Children's Guild's not doing a good job, then that you have access to the board to talk with them about the quality of the services that they're providing. And you actually have final say-so on it as to whether or not you want to retain the Children's Guild as the Educational Management Organization. If you didn't have us, then really what would happen is you would either need someone else like us, or you would have to sort of create this whole back office and support system and hire all the people to do that and oversee the operations of your charter school. So that's basically how the contract works. And as I mentioned to you, it costs you 12% of your budget. So if you have any questions, that's the basic concept that drives the Educational Management Organization contract with the DC Charter School. Okay. And then when you take a look at there's a philosophy and an instructional approach that runs the school. And Brian and I will try to give you a quick oversight of that. But I think the most important thing is each school in the District of Columbia that's a charter school try to create a unique or a boutique school that says, well, come to our school and this is what you get if you come to our school. So what's special about the DC Charter School? Probably you've already heard about the special education component, which is special because as far as I know, there is no DC charter school that focuses purely on special education or 60% special education, with the exception of one other school, but mostly that's for kids with developmental disabilities are in that school. So what makes us unique is we take the kids with autism, emotional disturbance, developmental delays, all kinds of disabilities. And the other part of this is if you take a look at the other thing that's special about the Children's Guild school is that we have transformation education. And I think it'll help you to understand what that really means. So Susan, would you put up the transformation education definition that's really in the manual, the board manual that every board member has?
Give me 1 minute. Can't seem to get that to go off.
While Susan's getting that up, one thing I can tell you is the simplest way to remember transformation education is really what it does. Transformation word in it is that when people send us kids, particularly in a special education school, we cannot manage this kid in school for whatever reason. What we're asking you to do is to transform this student and then if you can send them back to regular education or a regular public school, this would be a big help to us. So that becomes part of it. And the other part of transformation education, and you're going to have to make that a little bigger though, so they can actually see the words, Susan, that the core component of it is that you have a flexible environment, and it's really more about the staff and the organization. That's what transformation education is about. It's a mindset of the employees that work in a school, how they think. And so if we just take this, sort of line by line here, go back up to the top, Susan. Going the wrong way, other way. Transformation education's an organizational philosophy and an operating methodology for any child-serving organization, whether it be a school or a not-for-profit child-serving agency. So it's rooted in two foundational beliefs. Culture is the most powerful, has the most powerful impact on promoting growth and change in children. So I mean, each kid grows up in a culture, that family culture, and also, the physical culture of where they live. And this has a profound impact, and it's a great teacher because it's like air, You know, it's there, it's everywhere. And the child really learns quickly, particularly as they're growing up, from the culture that they're immersed in. So we know that culture has a great deal of power. So we take the whole idea of the school is to take the school culture and in a very deliberate way, make sure that everything is aligned with the messages that we want to send and the values that we want to send, the expectations. And what we want to happen, because all these teachers, every employee comes from a different culture to begin with. They may have worked, you know, even from where they worked, the culture that they worked in could be very different, could be more of a medically oriented culture. It could be that they worked in a warehouse and now they're a therapeutic aide and we're trying to train them. So they still might be thinking about work from the context of the business that they came from. So what we need to do is get everybody on the same page, and it almost becomes like a play that the physical environment and the way everybody's thinking and the roles that they're playing are consistent with the messages we want to send. We're also thinking that the thinking and behavior of the organization staff is the most important determinant of this transformational culture. So how, you know, just if a kid's doing something, how the staff members just thinking about it approaches that is really important, because that sets off everything. I could trigger a student that can de-escalate a student, that can make a kid feel that they're really capable. It could really make the kid feel as if they're not so capable. Consequently, transformation education is focused on developing an intentional, aligned, and integrated culture that radiates beliefs, values, and life skills that you need to be successful in life. We consider those basic life skills caring, contribution, and commitment. You care about yourself and others, and, you know, eventually you grow on through the society, your state, your country, and globally as you grow. Commitment is that you're not only caring, but you're committed to caring on a regular basis. It's not just that you do it once. And contribution is saying you have to do acts that actually tell the student that you do care. You can't just say you care. You got to really act in a way that's consistent with that. So one of the things that we're doing is making sure that everything's aligned. What's being aligned is the way the staff think, with how the building looks. So, I mean, you can't have a ripped chair. You can't have a cut in a chair or something that's looks kind of as if it's run down or neglected, because we have a lot of kids that are neglected. They come from environments that are neglected. So the expectation is to make sure that if you really care, and you care about everything, including the physical environment. So the curriculum has to send the same message. So in that way, you know, how you do things is important. And then you have to have policies that when you examine them are consistent with all these values and messages that we designed into the culture. Transformation education is different because we're not trying to fix the behavior of the kid. We're trying to change how the staff people work. And there's not many organizations that take the time that we do focused on culture. So when you hear about, when Kathy says we do these instructional rounds, one of the things that we're looking for all the time is at what percent is the staff consistent with what we say in our brochures about having a transformational culture. So that's basically what this, when you hear transformation education, that's basically what it is, that we're trying to create this culture that's constantly surrounding these kids. And we're not looking for the kids to change, because what we're really looking for is the staff to change how they're thinking and interacting with the kids, so that they're all pretty much consistent with the values and beliefs that we operate from. And I'm not going to go through this, but at least you should be aware of this, that we have a card, and that card is called the culture card. And it lays out all the beliefs and expectations that exist in the way we operate the school. And that becomes the key component that we work on every day. Every day we have a culture card meeting, and we discuss what those things mean within the context of the school, and how we work and operate the school and interact with one another. So that's basically the idea of transformation education. Any issues, questions, comments about that? Well, hearing none, then I'm going to turn this over to Brian so he can talk a bit about the other aspects of the instructional approach that go on here. So those are just two of the aspects that make the Children's Guild unique. And one's special education, one's transformation education. Brian's going to talk about the other two.
And so when it comes to kind of piggyback the transformation education that Dr. Ross has told you about, we really do take a deep dive into each and every person that becomes a staff member in our building. The transformation education process starts for us in the interview. It's something that has to be a part of what it is that we do and how we roll out who we are to potential new staff members, because I've been with the organization now for, I think, 18 years. And when you don't paint the proper picture for people in terms of how it is that we operate, when they come on board and see that we don't function as a traditional school does, a lot of the times they may feel some kind of way, or that we didn't give them a clear indication. And so it really is around having, finding people that are able to make shifts, to make changes, and they may not have a growth mindset when they come into the interview, but there has to be something inside of them that allows you to see that they can potentially grow into having a growth mindset and have the ability to make shifts. Because a lot of these things that we have to deal with in terms of dealing with staff on a day-to-day basis, some of them are career changers, some of them have been in education for a long period of time. But when you're coming from a traditional school setting, you have an idea and you have a way that you think around how things are supposed to operate in the school. And that's just not who we are in any way, shape, or form, except for the fact that we love children. We're going to educate them, but we do it very differently than other school buildings do. And it starts with that values infused culture that Dr. Ross is talking about, which is one of our Trans Ed 8. So I'm gonna start to share my screen, and I'm gonna be mindful of time because we are at 7:50 and I don't want to keep you all long. So I'm really just going to talk about this one component. The other thing that I want to expose you to is going to be our methodology of whole brain teaching, which is our stamp on how it is that we make sure that we are using not just the good language and the good direction of PBIS and positive behaviors, but really operating in a world of norms and not rules. And so making sure that we're creatively presenting all of this information to kids. I have a couple of videos that I wanted to show you, but not sure I'm gonna be able to get to all of that. So let me see what I can pull up. And pardon me, because I'm on my iPad now, my computer kicked me off, and I hope this works out. So let's see.
Well, Brian, whatever you can't get to in whole brain teaching, we can, just remember, we can pick that up because is sort of coming in 2 parts. So we're just trying to get as far as we can because I think that whole brain teaching is pretty important. So.
Absolutely. All right, this is just not working. I can't figure out how to.
Right, if you're looking for the Trans Ed 8, Susan can pull that up for you if you need it.
Yeah, Susan, can you just pull that up? I had a different format that I was going to share with to how I wanted to present it. But if you could just pull that up, Susan, that would be awesome. Okay, so yes, that's perfect. So with our Trans Ed 8, and this is something that, as Kathy mentioned earlier, we talk about regularly, not just in our own leadership meetings at the school, but we do it from at an organization level with Fidelity to make sure that we have a clear understanding of how we should be operating. And it also gives us access to different views, different ways of doing things, and really a shared responsibility of getting the opportunity to have not just the leadership be able to venture into the school. We can actually see who does what particular aspect of the Trans Ed 8, just at such a high level, and then we can start to send our staff over to kind of watch and view and commune also with other school buildings. But the values infused culture really does focus on a couple of things. One is that we're holding the culture card meetings on a regular basis that Dr. Ross referred to, whether or not the culture cards are attended by all staff, making sure that the adult interactions are always positive and respectful, not just with the kids, but also with one another. That's one of the things that we have to make sure that, again, new staff members that are coming on board realizes that students are always watching. Even when you don't think they're paying attention, they're paying attention. So how you choose to interact with each other is what's going to shape a kid's understanding and belief in just how it is that they are supposed to behave, whether children are having interactions in a positive and respectful way. We're always looking at our Trans Ed character education to make sure that it is deliberately taught and practiced in a way that is in tandem with just a regular instructional program, because it's important to make sure that we are teaching the kids the values that they're going to need in order to be successful, not just in their own personal lives, but being a positive impact on their communities when they go home. Making sure that the staff recognizes the quality of work and the courage and the vision among the students and their peers, giving the kids an opportunity to give their classmates feedback and recognition because they've done something well, and really growing their eye to recognize the quality in works, and making sure that they have the courage to be able to give those kudos to one another. And a lot of instances, kids don't like initially that praise or that feedback because they think that it's not genuine. But when they start to hear it, not just from the adults, but their peer group is starting to praise them, it really creates a great community and a great culture where kids really are excited to come to on a regular basis. You know, a lot of people in a lot of other schools, they'll talk about how, and just in general, how it's always been a joke that how, you know, some of the worst kids in the school, or the kids that show the worst behaviors, are the ones that are never absent, and they're never absent for a reason. They are coming from traumatic households. They're coming from trauma, you know, in their communities, in their neighborhoods. And when you have kids that are coming to school and they're walking into the building, and like we have some to the point where they'll turn in, you know, knives or some sort of weapon that they felt that they had to take through the community because they were scared to get on the metro or ride the bus because of you know, some sort of conflict that is happening in their community. It's hard to deal with, but it's good to see that they value their school enough to say, this is why I have this in my pocket, and this is something that, you know, I don't want to have in the school building because I don't want something to happen to one of my classmates, or, you know, I don't want to get kicked out of school, because they really do value the time that they get to spend. The next one is really around the well-being, which is really just dives into our instructional program, how it is that we're providing instruction for our kids on a daily basis, how it is that we're teaching them to really self-regulate and monitor their own behavior, how it is that we're engaging our families and community members to make sure that we're we have a nice, well-rounded program, and parents and families feel welcome to community events and activities that we may be having at school. Our well-being right now is happening on a virtual learning platform. We have family town halls that happen every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 o'clock. This will be our third one that's happening on this coming Thursday. The first two were just around general information sessions that we were having for parents, whether they were new or returning parents. And we're getting ready to start to roll out topic-based Thursday so that parents can decide whether or not it's something that they want to participate in. But we just have to create different platforms and make sure that parents know that they have a space to come to get information, because their well-being is just as important as their kids, especially in this distance learning platform. The enriched environments and experiences are some of the things that Dr. Ross has talked about in terms of, you know, just the feeling that you get when you come into our school. I know there's, you know, some of you that haven't been to the building and had the opportunity to come yet, but I'm really looking forward to have you in the building, because it is one thing that is always said when people come to visit DC, is that as soon as you walk through our front door, you get an absolute feeling around the good work that is happening in the building, and our kids get that on a daily basis, which is why it's so important for us to continue to do this work and to create this type of environment, because it allows our kids to open up their minds to the new information that we are trying to share. It allows them to feel comfortable with taking chances with their education, and and being vulnerable to say that, you know, I don't get it, or may I get some more assistance, where in other schools they haven't felt comfortable to do that. So they just sit quietly, and the next thing you know, they're 2 or 3 grade levels behind where they should be operating. The brain literacy component is really, again, what it is that we do from a whole brain teaching aspect, and just making sure that we are really being mindful of how it is that we're instructing all of our kids on a daily basis, and making sure that we're meeting them where they are, making sure that we are providing the instructional program through their best modality. Again, it starts with the teacher, though. We have to make sure that they have a clear understanding of how their students learn, how they're able to process information, because that's one of the things that we've identified, is that a lot of the times in school systems, it's not a kid's inability to learn, it's the teacher's inability to give kids information in the way that they learn best. We as adults will teach it the way that we want to teach it, in the way that it's most comfortable for us. But we have to take it a step further and make sure that, well, while we are planning these activities and we are planning these lessons, we are being absolutely mindful of how the kids are able to receive them. The next one is around the behavior motivation continuum. And again, just making sure that we do things from a positive behavioral standpoint. We use, restorative practices. Again, it is a great way to get buy-in in the community, in the culture. When kids do things in the building, they write letters, they stand in front of their class, and they apologize, and they may work with the maintenance team to make sure that everyone is doing what they need to do. And really quickly, to kind of shoot through, 6 is around the community influence, that really goes to along with number 5, the arts enhancement. We are really looking to build our arts integration program this coming school year, so that we can kind of rebrand ourselves in the District of Columbia, so that we can start to attract a different type of student that we generally haven't had in the past. And again, the ownership mindset, which is the last one, is really around just making sure that it's not just, an adult way of thinking. When we take ownership and we are able to stand in front of a group of kids and apologize for making a mistake, and taking ownership when, we may have taught something in an inappropriate fashion, it really gives kids just an authentic understanding that, we're just being honest, and everybody makes a mistake, and we have to kind of work our way through these problems together as a group, because that's what we have to do as a community and a culture. And when we meet again, I will take a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of how it is that we roll out each one of these things to our community, whether it be through our professional developments, whether it be through our orientations from an organizational standpoint before they come on board. It's called Onset, and how we just kind of intermingle and intertwine all of this Trans-Ed 8 into the professional learning communities that we have across the grade bands in our school building, to make sure that it's just constantly on our teachers' frontal lobes, and they are aware of it, at all times, and making sure that it's being done with fidelity inside of the school building. But I know we are a little bit after 8. So Susan, you can stop sharing that. Thank you for the save. And we will jump into the WBT the next time that we meet. Are there any particular questions about the Trans-Ed 8?
No, that was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we thank you for coming tonight. And like I said, there's a lot of things to understand about the school. But again, I think whether you remember them or not is not the key issue. I think just that you realize that they exist, and as we go through, the year, these things will sort of jump out at you. So your awareness is the most important part of this. So again, we thank you for coming. We look forward to seeing you on the 14th. So I guess that ends our meeting for tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for the presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.